Good morning. My name is Toru Jay Seo, and it is my pleasure to participate in Healthcare Expo in Taiwan on behalf of the Japan Pharmaceutical Licensing Association. And today I would like to discuss the power of science innovation in Japan and what we do well and where we need help. Before I move on, let me briefly tell you about the Japan Pharmaceutical Licensing Association, or JPLA. JPLA is a nonprofit organization that was originally established in 1990. We have approximately 800 members currently, and we usually have 4 quarterly meetings where we have approximately 150 people attending in those meetings. The aim of these meetings and aim of JPLA as a whole is to really have an information sharing via lecture series and quarterly member meetings relating to the business development operations. And this includes the current events, such as the interactions with the venture capitals, new ideas on modalities and drug discovery process, and etc. Also, we provide a venue for mingling and the business transactions among the participants. And we thrive to create the ecosystem where BD representatives can interact with the friendly competition and the mutual friendship mindset. And this slide shows one of the quarterly meetings. As I said, we have about 150 people attending all the time. And this is a pre-COVID era. I think this is in 2019. Unfortunately, for last year and a half, we had to resort to an online meeting because of the COVID-19, but we are planning to resume face-to-face meetings starting 2022. So now back to the topic. Japan has been doing quite well, and it does have a very strong basic research capabilities, leading to a novel discovery of drug targets, some of which were awarded with a Nobel Prize. And one is very common, and now is a top-selling drugs as a Keytruda, is anti-PD-1 antibodies for oncology drugs. But in addition to that, there's a whole series of lists in immunologies and inflammations, some of which has become the blockbusters. And in Japan, we do have a very strong academic and national research institutes who collaborate both within Japan, but also with external parties outside of Japan. This pie chart demonstrates the countries that contributes to the drug discovery or the generation of drugs. Obviously the United States is about 40 to 45%, depending on which year you look. And in Japan, which is shown at the lower half, which accounts for about 6%. This isn't bad. 6% is quite good, but it used to be better. So in 2005 and before, the contribution of Japan to the drug market was 11 to 12. Oftentimes it went up to 13% as well. But as you can see, as time goes by, the contribution of Japan has declined quite significantly, probably more than 2-fold in 2020. This is the old slide, but the number is quite accurate. In contrast, China has been doing extremely well with the new technologies and new generation of people, and with a lot of efforts by the government. China has grown significantly, going from 2.7% to 11%. One example that I'd like to introduce is cell therapy. The cell therapy became very common in Japan as Dr. Yamanaka has introduced IPS, or inducible pluripotent cells, that can be applied to a different types of cells, or that can generate different type of cells and can be used as a potentially a drug replacement or the new treatment using cell therapy. This was introduced in 2010, 2011. Dr. Yamanaka was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2012, I think. The Japanese government has formulated the development structures for cell therapy, or to facilitate the clinical development of cell therapy. Because, as shown in this slide, there were a lot of expectations on and prospects on cell therapy to contribute to the life science ecosystem. As a result of that, the regulatory agencies in Japan, or the PMDA, has renewed the PMDA Act to accelerate the development and approval of drug for regenerative medicine. This is a very complicated slide, so I'm not going into the details, but the bottom line is that the government has created a new development strategy that can substantially reduce the approval process and development process. For in the field of regenerative medicine, instead of taking 7 years, they can get by with 5 years or even less, which is substantial for those companies who work on cell therapy. However, even though Japan was leading the cell therapy field in 2014 or so, the other country has caught up and also has managed to implement the new development strategies and regulatory process. So in 2014, this is the landscape of cell therapy in different regions. In Korea, there was about 31 in the clinic. The United States obviously was the highest. EU had 42. Japan had actually 4, but there was clinician-initiated clinical trials, and which was very common at that time, and the number has reached about 65 clinical trials. Unfortunately, the cell therapy has developed so far, and Japan is really lagging behind for the reason that I will mention in a minute. If you look at this slide, compared to the one in 2014, Japan still remains the same, in the 30 to 50 clinical trials. But in other countries, the increases in the cases of clinical trials using cell therapy have been significant in all regions. That includes EU, Korea, USA. And one noteworthy thing, and one most significant thing, I should say, is that China. In 2014, there were very few clinical trials, if there's any. But in 2020, there are more than 45 clinical trials related to a cell therapy. And it is said that there are more than 100 clinical trials running in China that are not always reported in clinicaltrials.gov. So as you can see, Japan was really leading the space in early space, but over the time, they really lagged behind, even though we do our best efforts to keep up with it and also to facilitate and adapt with a new modality. And one of the reasons, of course, is the ecosystem. This highlights the ecosystem in highlights the comparison of ecosystem in the United States and Japan. United States is doing extremely well in academic space, which is handed to the startups that develop further for a more tangible stage. And then the biotech venture usually takes that and then ultimately either collaborate with the pharma or to license out to the pharma. So there's a transitions going from academic seeds all the way up to the tangible drug targets. And there are certain players that often overlaps, but there's a clear strategies and a way around. In Japan, in contrast, there's a lot of great science in academics, but the middle part where these new academic seeds are translated into a more tangible assets or the drug candidates are very limited. And in old days, the pharmaceutical companies in Japan used to support this, but because of the financial predicament that many Japanese pharmaceutical companies are facing, it's not as common as it used to be in the past. Therefore, the middle part of translation is really missing in Japan. And this is one of the reasons why, there was a delay over years, because the new technology alone will not make a drug. You need to have a lot of translational research done to make it into a drug. And this also highlights another predicament in Japan. And this slide illustrates the hurdles in translational research and development path. What this slide shows are 4 countries based on the time to achieve the fundraising and also the first in human entry in the clinical trials. And this slide only accounts for the drug discovery bioventure in Japan, Israel, Germany, and Switzerland. And one thing that I like to focus on is that the amount of fund available is very, very, very limited. And they usually achieve fundraising after 8 to 10 years. Again, this is a little old. It's getting better, but it is still very low compared to other countries. And what's more important is the dot line that you see, or the vertical dot line you see. This is the average entry for clinical trials, as compared to other countries where most of them achieved the clinical trial entry within 5 years. The average entry or average time scale for the clinical trial entry is 8 to 10 years. So again, you can see that we are really lagging behind in sort of clinical development because the scheme is still not optimized to promote the new modalities and new technologies, such as cell therapy that I mentioned earlier. This summarizes the current situation in Japan. And I titled this as Japan as a partner for the innovation driver, which I hope you can consider in more depth. And I highlighted challenges and opportunities. First of all, scientists in Japan are highly motivated and talented in generating novel science and technology, as I mentioned in earlier slides. Japan has a well-established and highly experienced entities, pharmaceutical industries, for example, in many parts of health sectors. However, the absolute number of tangible targets and drugs used are scarce. This is not only in Japan, but everywhere. So everybody's hunting for the new opportunities and new drug targets. And as I mentioned earlier, the new modalities are in high demand, and we are really looking for those opportunities. And in a slide that I mentioned, a path to the biotech venture is very limited because the funding is not high, and also the path to the clinical trials is not as optimized as we would like to be. In addition to the reason I mentioned earlier, the reason the bioventure is difficult to do in Japan is because there's a lack of experience in creating, managing, and expanding the new companies, especially the biotech. And also, this is augmented by the fact that there's a limited routes for global reach out and market expansion. So a lot of biotech tends to do in Japan, focusing in Japan. And in general, there is a mindset of conservatism and bureaucracy that often is negative contributor to the innovations in Japan. So this slide shows the essentials for innovations, as many of you are familiar with. This includes the knowledge sharing or the changes in mindset, entrepreneurship and culture, obviously the funding, and young, agile, and companies. And we need to have science communities. So some of these are already in Japan, but entrepreneurship cultures, funding, and the young, agile companies are still limited in Japan. And this is where we need to have a collaboration. We need to have help. So with that, this is what I think is coming. We would expect the innovation via multidisciplinary collaborations. It's not only between different sectors, but all in the different countries. And we really look forward to working with the companies in Taiwan and elsewhere. And by doing so, we are hoping that we will be able to bring more technology that can be adapted to advanced drug research. And as I mentioned earlier, new type of novel targets and modalities are in high demand, and we think we can achieve through collaborations. And then the whole drug discovery process needs to be optimized. This includes the entry to the clinical development, and then changing the regulatory schemes for to be competitive in the global market. So this requires digitizations of research and development in the healthcare space. And then last but not least, we expect the academia contributes more to the drug discovery. And because of all these new ideas, we want to collaborate, and we are looking for the partners in Japan, Taiwan, and elsewhere. So let's work together. Thank you very much for your time.